You know that feeling? When something just doesn't feel quite right with your body.
Yeah, those aches or maybe fatigue.
Exactly. And you go to the doctor, but they can't quite pin it down.
Yeah.
It's really frustrating.
It is, and it happens more often than you might think, that sense of real physical distress. But, the tests come back clear.
Right. So today on the deep dive, we're going into that very thing.
We're looking at psychosomatics.
Yeah, guided by this really interesting discussion with Sergei Bobnovsky we found on his YouTube channel.
And our goal really is to unpack what he means by psychosomatic issues.
What causes them, what they feel like.
Or according to him, yeah. And importantly, what he suggests might help address them.
Definitely. And just, for context, this is a medical professional sharing his viewpoint in a video. It's his take.
Right, on this whole area where mind and body meet, which people talk about a lot now.
Okay, so let's dive in. Psychosomatics. According to Bobnovsky, what's the kind of the core idea?
Well, in his view, it really boils down to a kind of communication breakdown.
Communication between
Your conscious mind and your body. Like you stop understanding or maybe trusting the signals your body is sending.
Huh. Interesting. Feels like we've had other names for this sort of thing over the years, right? You mentioned some older ones.
He did, yeah. Vegetavascular insufficiency.
Right.
And neurocirculatory dystonia. Those were like earlier ways to label these often kind of vague symptoms when doctors couldn't find a specific physical disease.
So why psychosomatics now? Is it just a trend?
Well, maybe partly, but it also suggests a shift, a broader look that includes the psychological side, not just the purely physical mechanism.
Okay, so even if there isn't like a clear biological cause found on a test, the pain or discomfort is still genuinely felt.
Oh, absolutely. That's crucial. He stresses that the distress is real for the person, but it doesn't involve the kind of organic changes in the body tissues you'd see with a typical disease. He gave an example, like a headache that feels like one intense droplet of pain. It's powerful, sure, but it's different from, say, the clear signs of actual heart disease. It doesn't signal a structural problem in the same way.
Okay, that distinction makes sense. It's like the body's alarms going off, but maybe not for the reason we first assumed.
Kind of. And he also mentioned this issue of overdiagnosis. How does that fit in?
Right, yeah.
Well, he suggests there's sometimes a trend towards hyperdiagnosis. Someone comes in with, say, back pain, and they might leave with multiple diagnoses. Spondylosis, chondrosis, herniation, protrusion, maybe stenosis too, all potentially related to one underlying issue.
So lots of labels.
Lots of labels. And when the standard medical toolkit struggles to find one clear organic cause that explains everything,
then psychosomatic might come into play.
Exactly. It sometimes becomes the label when the usual physical explanations aren't quite fitting or aren't obvious from the tests.
Right. So it shifts the focus. Okay, so if it's not always a clear physical thing, what factors does Bobnovsky think do contribute to these issues?
He points to a whole network of things, really, environmentally. Things like poor ecology, maybe not great nutrition, not enough good sleep.
Okay, the basics.
Yeah. And then lifestyle stuff. Stress, big one. Work stress, personal stress. Poor diet again, alcohol, smoking. All contributors.
Stress always seems to come up, doesn't it? He talks specifically about chronic stress, though. What was his angle there?
Yeah, he did. He explained it as something that can really impact the central nervous system.
How so?
Leading to what he called blocked thinking. You know, that feeling of being stuck?
Oh, yeah. Like you're in a loop.
Exactly. Trapped in worry, can't see a way out. And he also made the point, like, stress is subjective. Right?
Meaning?
What stresses one person out might be fine for someone else. Examples he gave were like ongoing relationship problems, bad sleep patterns, too little or too much.
Right.
Or even just pushing yourself too hard physically without enough recovery time. That all adds up.
So it's about balance, not just avoiding obvious bad stuff. Now, medication. Often the first stop for people with persistent issues. What's Bobnovsky's view on that for psychosomatics?
He expressed some concern there, specifically about antidepressants being maybe overprescribed by general practitioners in these cases.
Why the concern?
His argument is they often don't get to the root cause of psychosomatic symptoms. They might mask the problem and they can have side effects, but they don't necessarily fix the underlying disconnect or the stress factors.
So if the root isn't, say, a straightforward chemical imbalance, the meds might not be the full answer.
That seems to be his perspective, yes. It might not lead to a lasting solution on its own.
Okay, that's definitely a different perspective for some. So if not just medication, what kind of symptoms are we actually talking about here? What might someone feel?
He described a pretty wide range, often kind of vague things like tingling, numbness that moves around, itching with no rash, headaches that don't fit a clear pattern, joint pain without obvious arthritis, even vascular feelings or issues where tests don't show anything wrong structurally.
Yeah, vague feels like the right word. That must be why they're so tricky to deal with medically.
Absolutely. And he also brought up how a physical issue can sometimes become psychosomatic.
How does that work?
Well, imagine you start with, say, real back pain from weak muscles. Maybe something standard checks don't focus on as much as, like, discs.
Okay.
If that pain lingers and you don't get a clear answer or effective treatment, that can cause a lot of anxiety. Psychological distress.
I see.
So the initial physical problem plus the worry and frustration kind of merge. The physical issue then gets tangled up with the psychological response, turning into something more psychosomatic.
Wow, so it's like a feedback loop. Physical discomfort fuels the worry. The worry maybe makes the physical feeling worse.
Pretty much. And related to that, he briefly touched on hypochondria.
How does that fit?
Just that, in his view, some people might develop a really intense focus on their physical symptoms.
An obsession, almost.
Maybe. And sometimes, perhaps unconsciously, that focus on being ill can become a way to sidestep other difficult things in life. Social issues, emotional stuff.
Okay, interesting point. Right, so we've got the definition, the factors, the symptoms. Let's move to the solutions.
Yeah.
What does Bobnovsky actually recommend?
Okay, his number one recommendation.
Movement.
Movement. Simple as that.
Well, specific kinds. He's big on targeted exercises, but also things like cold showers, using a sauna.
Oh.
Basically, using physical activity as the main way to manage the stress that often underlies these issues.
Yeah.
He sees it as more fundamental than just relying on pills.
So using the body to help the mind, essentially. He also mentioned reconnecting with the body.
Yes, learning to really listen to it, understand the signals, the sensations through deliberate movement.
How?
He talked about kinesiotherapy, therapy through movement. The idea is to build awareness, tune into what your body's actually telling you, not just the loud symptom.
Becoming more body literate, maybe. And he said something about overcoming fear of the body. Yeah, that's part of it. When you have unexplained pain, it's easy to become anxious, even scared of physical sensations.
Sure.
By exercising, understanding what your body can do, you rebuild confidence. That understanding can reduce the fear that fuels some psychosomatic symptoms.
That makes sense. Regaining trust in your own body. He used that Russian phrase, too. Something.
Yeah,
It's the book.
roughly self-governing or self-controlled, self-sufficient, and self-regulating.
Okay.
It sums up his belief that the body has this amazing innate ability to manage itself and heal if we give it the right conditions, like the right movement.
It's a powerful idea. And he told that story about the older woman.
Oh, yeah, the 75-year-old? That
What?
was striking.
Tell us again.
She came in feeling generally unwell, low energy, kind of down.
Right.
And after just one session of the right exercises, she felt this big shift. Mentally brighter, physically better. It just shows that powerful, immediate link.
It really does. He also talked about emotions, negative ones.
He did. He sees negative emotions as, well, contributing factors to illness, including these kinds of issues.
So think positive.
Easier said than done, he acknowledged. But yes, cultivating a more positive outlook, learning to manage those negative feelings, he sees that as beneficial for overall resilience.
And looping back to movement, he called exercise an antidepressant.
Right. Because of the endorphins.
The runner's high thing.
Exactly. Physical activity releases chemicals that boost mood, reduce stress. So he suggests exercise itself can be a direct remedy for the low mood and stress tied up in psychosomatic problems.
So it's a physical intervention with direct psychological benefits. Now, he also mentioned age differences, how these things might show up.
Yeah, some interesting observations there. For older adults, he thought psychosomatic disorders were pretty common,
But
often linked to, sort of, health anxiety, constantly checking blood pressure, worrying about age-related decline. He called it senile psychosomatics.
okay, and younger people.
For younger individuals, he saw it starting more often with those vague complaints, maybe linked to sedentary habits like lots of computer time, plus emotional stress, relationship stuff, work pressure, all piling up without good ways to release it.
So maybe anxiety about future health for older folks and accumulated present-day stress for younger ones.
That seems to capture his general point, yeah.
R-
Different triggers may be leading to similar kinds of mind-body distress.
Okay. This has been really fascinating. As we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things to take away from Bubnovsky's perspective here?
I'd say, first, that core idea of the mind-body communication breakdown.
Right.
Second, the big role of environment and lifestyle, especially chronic stress.
Got it.
Third, the nature of the symptoms, often vague, maybe evolving from physical issues. And fourth, definitely his strong focus on movement.
Movement as the key.
Yeah, movement, body awareness, overcoming that fear, using the body's own regulating systems. That's his main prescription, really.
It's a compelling way to look at things so many of us experience. It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Like, how can we get better at noticing those early, subtle signals from our bodies?
Before they escalate.
Yeah, addressing that initial imbalance, physical or emotional,
Yeah.
before it turns into something more persistent and confusing.
Or maybe flipping it around. Could making more space for just moving our bodies mindfully be a more powerful tool for our general well-being, mentally and physically, than we usually give it credit for?
Definitely something to consider, a different lens for those aches and pains.